Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for coming. My name is Mandi Walls. I'm a Principal Systems Administrator at AOL. This is my second time at Velocity. I'm your gender diversity token for today. For the past couple of years, my primary project has been www.aol.com, our main product, our main website. And I'm going to go through today a little bit about the process we went through to build it out on a new platform. So traditionally, AOL is very much a proprietary platform shop, and change in management, change in focus has taken us to moving our products to open source and the usual open source stack, and we'll talk about that in a little while. So it's kind of a unique opportunity, because rather than having a product that's growing organically with word of mouth or adoption or that sort of thing, we have a very established audience for this particular product. So we're not making, we make incremental changes. We basically had one farm, we built another entirely separate farm, and then we migrated traffic. So the whole process took us 14, 15 months from dev start to migration complete. So our old platform was known as the AOL Dynamic platform. Our new platform, they've coined the term Dynapub for dynamic publishing, as our sites are dependent on published content. We're not Web 2.0, we're not letting our users generate a lot of our content, we're pushing content to them. AOL.com in particular is sort of a catch-all tabloid sort of strange amalgamation of content on the main page. So we'll take a look at some of the growing pains and the knowledge migration that went into this for my team, for the dev team, on how to completely change our mindset for managing this kind of site. AOL.com, you might have seen it before, you might not, because you know how to use a computer. So yeah, our audience is not the most tech-savvy people on the internet. That's fine, it's an audience we can serve. And it's still AOL's main homepage, so it links to various internal sites, all of our channels, our AIM products, mail products, all those sorts of things lead off of here. And this is where we bring our users in for the first time on the AOL client. Yes, it still exists, all that sort of thing. We also run on this plant Netscape, our Latino, which is Spanish-American portal, Mexico portal, partner co-brands, things that we partner with hotels, with ISPs, that sort of thing. And it runs the in-client welcome screen. That's a small part of the total capacity, the total traffic right now, but several years ago when we first started migrating things over to converge them, it was a larger portion. The main site itself is basically the same page 55 million times a day, which for AOL is a big deal. And it doesn't change that much. There's some dynamic content, it's feeds driven, that sort of thing, not user generated content. But for the most part, it's one big page. Going back in history, thank you, Wayback Machine. This is awesome, right? 1996, this is what AOL.com looked like at that time. The main focus was to entice people to come sign up for AOL, pay us for your ISP service, that sort of thing. It was very much driven towards moving people into our walled garden. As the years go on, this was the first migration I was involved with. This is AOL.com 2.0 in 2005, 9 years later. There's a little bit of stuff on it about signing up for becoming an AOL member and that sort of thing, but it's moved into a more modern approach to portals, which was popular at that time. This was our first migration onto Linux, so we've been on Linux since 2005, and this was the migration onto the AOL Dynamic platform, which we just came off of. This is AOL.com 3.0. If you're at Yahoo, this is the one that looks like you, right? I won't go into why that happened. It wasn't my decision. Focusing more on the content that our users wanted. We know they like to know about celebrities, and they like everything that happens on TV and movies and that sort of thing. and we're downplaying the client experience. So we're starting to see the evolution of not just the site, but AOL's business process. What's going to make us money? We're coming in here now away from the client, the walled garden, the dial-up ISP business, and onto a web business. So you see a more robust ad on the right rail there, more of a money-making ad scheme for this particular product. And this is our new one. We started this migration in October. This is what it looks like now. Content still essentially the same sort of stuff, a little bit slicker look and feel. We now have our tip of the hat to Web 2.0 social networking. We integrate with Yahoo Mail, we integrate with Gmail, we integrate with Twitter, Facebook, those sorts of things, right on the main page for our users. So if they have accounts somewhere else, we'll provide them with the status updates and the feeds and that sort of thing using all the open APIs provided by those sites. But still essentially the same product. What's interesting, though, now is that you have to look for any information about the AOL client. It's buried at the bottom under services. It's not a focal point. It's no longer even really discussed. It's a secondary piece for our web business. So the migration has sort of completed in a way for this particular set of content that we're moving away from being a ISP business to being a web business. This is my gratuitous up and to the right. Everyone loves graph porn. This is hits per month. I wasn't allowed to give you the numbers, but this is our trend over the last 4 years. So while we're doing all this, while we're thrashing this farm and doing all this work and migrating things, the hits are still going up. So we're working with not only load from our audience, but also the challenges of migrating a lot of content, changing the platform out from underneath. And this also means we have a very large audience that we need to take care of and make sure that we don't lose them. Because, you know, our portal maybe doesn't offer anything awesome compared to yahoo.com. So if we come into this migration and screw it up, there's no reason for people to stick with us. So to be very careful when we're doing such a disruptive activity to make sure that we're not going to lose everybody who's been kind enough to stick with us all these years. So I'm very conscious of taking care of these folks because they are very vocal. They all complain about anything. So a little bit about our old platform. This is the AOL Dynamic platform. This thing is ancient, really. It's been around a long time. If you can read the graphic there, the bottom is labeled as pub, the top is labeled as AOL server front ends, in the middle, the cloud there, is There Be Dragons. The squirrely middle stuff, this is what the architecture actually looks like. This is a nightmare. This is all proprietary interconnects. It's all AOL server. The configuration and all the application code is written in Tickle. And it's such a nightmare. One misplaced bracket can bring down an entire server farm. If you're really clever, one misplaced bracket will bring down this entire infrastructure. Awesome. Thank you. So this is what we were dealing with. My team did not manage this entire infrastructure going into this migration. We had other teams that we shared these responsibilities with, but all of AOL's main content comes through here. So we're doing this migration on all of these farms, but basically what we were running prior to this migration was one set of those little blue boxes across the middle there. And we could blame other people for all the other subsequent problems that the other boxes provide for us. Most of the connections here are proprietary interconnect. They were written for this platform. So if someone were to ask me, why didn't you do this a component at a time? Well, now, damn it, I don't want to port my Tickle connectivity stack into Apache. That's not going to win anybody anything. So we didn't take that approach. We couldn't come into this environment and say, all right, I'm going to pull out this web server and I'm going to stick Apache in, because all the interconnects are done with this proprietary RPC thing. There's no HTTP here. So yet another knot to untangle. And that diagram's from 2005. It hasn't changed at all. This stuff still exists. So a little bit about ADP. It is AOL server on every layer. Good and bad. It means you only have to pull it out of CVS and build it once to deploy it across the entire farm. We developed it, I think, originally internally, and the little bit of maintenance that gets done on it was done internal to AOL until 2006, when the main guy quit, and he loaded it to the internet, and it's like a tree falling in the forest. You load your code onto Google Code, and nobody bothers to download it. Did it really get there, kind of thing? So 10 years of continuous new development. There's a lot of stuff in here. There's a lot of good stuff in here. Not all of it is bad. None of it is stupid. There's some really neat things that we've been doing in here because we learned over the years to do a whole lot of traffic with a little bit of stupid things. And so we had a lot of historical knowledge, a lot of tweaks, a lot of performance hacks, a lot of things that were baked into this. Most of it's proprietary, point-to-point, permanent connections on the networking, which is fantastic when things go down, because server A has a permanent outbound connection to server B, and server B takes a nap. Server A sits and spins and waits for it. Good job, guys, thanks. So we're trying to get out of all the problems that we cause for ourselves, moving towards HTTP and connectionless, stateless sort of connectivity. The neat things that it does is that it stores all the data in RAM. So you can talk about pushing things to memcache, and you can do your caching wherever, but when it comes right down to it, this is neat. It will take data off the data layer, stick it into RAM, and just hold it there. And because it's Tickle, XML parsing in Tickle is not something you want to get hold of. So it's all serialized Tickle objects. So it's bracket, data, bracket, whatever. It just stores it in memory. So we had the ability to, with just a little bit of RAM, cache 99.4% of the data for AOL.com. So our cache hit rate was just amazing. And on some of our other platforms, we had the other site that was just about as big as .com was a combined channels plant, and we had 80 sites. It would serve anywhere from 250 million to 500 million different URLs during the day, and with 40 megs of RAM, we still got more than 90% cache hit. So we were very cache intensive so that we could get this stuff off the network and work with it. Very cool. Configuration in Tickle, not cool. We had multiple front-end farms all sharing the same infrastructure. So, like, I have AOL.com, there's news, there's weather, there's all these other things that sit side by side by side, and they all share this back-end infrastructure. So if someone does something stupid to the configuration on one, it affects everybody. So there's a lot of shared disasters waiting to happen. We're optimized for publishing. We're not looking for stuff coming in from users, that sort of thing. We're publishing feeds usually that go out from, we pull them in from Reuters, we pull them in from a weather ingester, weather service, that sort of thing, spin them up, put them into our data format, and sit them in the data layer. And that's really where the optimization came in for this. It's still handling millions of hits a day after huge migration efforts internally for the development teams. If you're into cheesy news about celebrities, popeater.com is one of our sites that still sits in this architecture. We scaled it at a whopping 45 hits per second. We're burning up the internet here. So working with a proprietary system, there's good points and bad points. Good stuff, the person who wrote this thing originally might sit down the row. It might be someone that you can just get up and go talk to. Not so much something you can do with Apache. Yeah, you can talk to them over the internet, webs, email, that sort of thing, which is awesome. But it's not the same as a face-to-face conversation with someone you know, and then you can force them into doing the things you need them to do. The converse side of that is they may have left the company years ago, and that's the sort of situation we got into where the last of our AOL server folks left 2 weeks ago. So now we're kind of stuck, and thankfully we have this product off of that platform, but there's still other things that sit there. Other good stuff, I can write my own extensions fairly easily. They don't have to be approved by anybody. You know, they just kind of go in. On the converse side, yeah, you have to. Because nobody's writing CAPTCHA for AOL server. Nobody's writing some of the other things that we've needed over the years. We don't even have an SSL module for this right now. So there's all kinds of awesome things happening there. And of course, we have no licensing because we own it. Of course, then on the other side, if you have a problem, since we don't have any more internal experts on this, Google can't help us. So you're kind of stuck. And we've sort of worked around and coded around and hacked in some really ugly things because there's just no support for it. And you can't progress. So you have something proprietary like this, and it sits there and it runs fine, but nobody can agree on what to go to next. You end up a couple years behind. And we're a couple years behind the internet and all those awesome things that everybody else gets to do. And part of it is that we've been stuck in this feedback loop of trying to figure out where to go and what to do with this proprietary format. And we're finally starting to get some momentum towards getting off of it. So where we're going, and our new platform was named Dynapub by our now CTO. And it's built on the same stuff that a lot of other people are using for once. So we've got Java and Tomcat in our application layer, Apache on the front end. We are using MySQL. We also use some Solr, although it's not in this deployment. And because we do so much feeds and ingestion and that sort of thing, we've gone with Talend to manage that data and do the loading of those into our database structure. So looking at the new architecture for AOL.com, it's a lot more for me to manage, because before I was only doing one little set of blue boxes. So now I have all of this. And most of it's non-stupid, which is nice. It makes it much easier to actually manage. We're not doing anything weird anymore. So we use NetScalers. We load balance across our Apache front ends. We do some tracking for internal reporting for click-through rates and engagement and that sort of thing. We have our own CDN origins because we actually figured out we should cache things on the CDN. Then we do some interesting things in our data layer. Before, our data was all serialized tickle objects, no parsing needed, that sort of thing. Now we're doing what's called atomics, and this came from CNET. Our CTO actually came to us from CNET and brought this along. And it's interesting in that it stands for atomics to MySQL in CNET something, but it allows you to put this plugin into your Apache server, and it talks to MySQL and throws back XML. And for us, it's awesome. You know, it's very simple to set up and does what we needed to do. The databases underlying this are all denormalized. Someone mentioned that earlier. Denormalizing your data, it's okay to duplicate things because that storage is cheap, and you can push things out more simply. And so we're doing that. We have a lot of basically all the modules that appear on AOL.com have their own atomics layer now. So we have different data sources for all of those. And it allows us to sort of manage them in a less complex sort of way. But then all the data comes in from the publishing system, and anything on the page can be changed. So at any given time, there's somebody sitting at a desk in Dulles, Virginia, who can change absolutely anything on that page without talking to anybody else. And some of that's good. You can promote things that are going to get a lot of hits and drive a lot of ad revenue. Some of that's bad because you can end up with spelling mistakes and weird things showing up, and maybe that's not exactly the sort of stuff you want on your main screen and those sorts of debates. But it allows us to have a very aware system to look at what our users are clicking on, what we can put in front of them to make them click more. So it's very much driven towards driving that engagement with our users. And we already know, after all these years, what they really like. So bring in a Britney Spears story, put it up, okay, they're going to click on that. What could go underneath that they'll click on, and those sorts of decisions can be made. So the new architecture is a standalone environment. We're not sharing with anybody else anymore. So we make our own messes, we cause our own crashes, and if we're doing well, then awesome for us. We have fewer internally developed systems. Atomics is now managed internally for us, so that's our only thing that we are internally dependent on. Everything else comes off the internet. We have standard connectivity for everything over HTTP. No longer dependent on any weird stack, any strange packets, nothing strange going on in the network anymore. Some of the problems with this that we found is that it hides fewer flaws. The bad code shows up now because it's not Java's fault that you suck. So where we could hide things in the tickle and we had buried in little tricks and tips and things over the years to boost the performance of everything, we didn't have that anymore. So it strips everything back out and says, okay, well, here's this thing. Everybody else can use it. Why can't you? And that has caused some heartbreak in the development teams to know that, all these things that we used to get away with, we have to sort of sit back and reevaluate. And we now depend more on the technical know-how from our development teams because they're learning as much as we are. It's been 5 years since I had run a Java process. Some of them had never learned Java. So there's a whole new training thing that was involved with this at the very beginning. So some growing pains. This is where we are as of the end of April. The red line is 1 instance on the old environment, hits per minute. In the blue is 1 instance of the Tomcats in the new environment. And we're not quite to the point yet where we're comfortable pushing 45 hits per second consistently into these Tomcats. We're still learning how to tweak these, how to improve the code, how to work with our network environment and all these other things in this stack to get the performance back to where we were before. And we started this migration in October, and this is where we are as of the end of April. It's still an ongoing process. So we learned that one size fits most. There's a huge push across all of AOL to move into this Dynapub environment, to use Java, to use Apache, and to bring everything up to speed and make up for the last 2.5, 3 years that we've sort of been stuck. And there was a big push for everybody to have sort of the same environment, and we learned that that wasn't going to work for this particular product. That was a hard lesson for a lot of people who aren't directly involved with the product to learn. My portal team, my ops guys, the dev guys, we know we're special, but it took some time for everybody else to figure out that we were special too. We learned that our proprietary platforms were hiding a whole host of sins, that I had dumped code into the old environment, somebody else had dumped some stuff into the old environment to get around some of the bad things we were doing. We lost all of that. And the learning curve on the new technology is frustrating. I mean, we had devoted years of man-hours to squeezing the last little bit of blood out of the stone that was AOL server. And we had a lot of expertise in that space, but as people sort of drop off and attrition happens and the push to a new environment happens, then coming back up to speed on Java when you haven't looked at it before, done it before, especially not at the scale we needed it to be done, was very frustrating on both the dev and operations side. Our customers aren't going to like anything we do, really. So we had some positive feedback, some negative feedback. Some they didn't know what's Twitter, I don't understand, typing information back to us. But the important part was to not be down for them. So even though we were doing all of this stuff on the backside, could not be unavailable for them because they can just go somewhere else. It's easy for us to get in a hurry and lose time. We tried to throw a lot of extra developers who had some Java experience at the project early on, and ended up delaying us 8 weeks or something like that, just because they didn't have the intimate knowledge of the project itself. So being patient, you can get it done, and it actually looks reasonable. The architectural complexity on the old environment, yeah, it's all managed in Tickle. It was all managed centrally. So we had one big text file that had 1,200, 1,500 server lines in it, has all the information about them, IP addresses, port numbers, location in the network, what data center, all this other information. And it was all managed in one central file, which is great if nobody screws it up. So we ended up coming into the new environment without that, trying to figure out how are we going to manage this. We don't have any internal culture to use things like CF Engine or Puppet or any of that for our management. We have a lot of internally developed tools that don't necessarily interface with anything from the open source world. That's our next project, to work on that. But we had to manage a lot of things manually, which was very complex. We looked at manage things with RPMs and doing a lot of other complex things, and got ahead of ourselves and ended up wasting a lot of time. Looking at knowledge migration, I wasn't sure what to actually call this, but knowledge migration works. The old platform's 10 years old. We had things that we learned there for a reason, right? And AOL's our culture is very insular. We don't look out to what people are doing very often. So nobody's listening to, oh, we're using memcache. Nobody's listening to what's going on in the rest of the environment with our peers and competitors. And we had this caching mechanism in the old platform for a reason, right? So we're serving the same page 55 million times a day. And the decision was made by our executive technical governance board, or whatever they call themselves, to go into the new platform without caching. And this means we're not caching any data coming out of our data store before or when it gets to the application layer, so from our atomics into Tomcat. And you can see from the left-hand side there, that's what the scaling looked like at 20% of our total traffic. On the data layers, these atomic systems, with no caching. So we're basically scaling 3 different layers for every hit. We have to scale the Apache layer, which is pretty trivial for us to scale that. That's fine, it does very well. We had to then scale the Tomcat layer for every hit, and that can be a little confusing based on how CPU intensive the code actually is. And then we were scaling the data layer for every single hit, because we were going back to the source multiple times per page. And we basically had to have a change of religion for us to get any caching into this. It was a huge, huge problem. And you can tell from where it drops off there in the center, we're now scaling based on how many Tomcat servers we have in the middle. The data layer stuff is only talked to a regular number of times per Tomcat versus per page hit, and that was a huge win for us. The spike in the middle was a new feature that came in and hadn't had its caching set up, but you can see that it suddenly just jumps right back up and says, hey, I'm not cached. And we had to get in control of that again so that we don't have to then scale all 3 of these layers for every hit that comes in, because we want to grow. We want to keep going up and to the right, bringing more hits in, more users, and we don't want to have to put more capital into this system if we don't have to. It also helped us with our metrics and monitoring. We have regular access logs. There's plenty of tools to look at those things. We have standard formats. It means the same thing on my Apache as it does on your Apache. We could mimic some of that in AOL Server. Not always. Some of the things are a little screwy. All the HTTP connection simplifies all of our monitoring. We don't need to have a special monitor that talks whatever crazy-ass proprietary protocol out to ping the system and say, hey, are you there? Are you there? Are you there? It's like speaking in Greek to something else. And our techs and our NOC are now more able to actually realize that something's down. We had all kinds of weird stuff built into the old system to surface over HTTP when the proprietary stuff was down and all this other weird stuff was going on. This is so much simpler. Some things about managing the people resources in this. You can imagine that when you have a huge product like this, there's work to be done, obviously, on the new stuff. But the process takes so long that somebody has to watch the old thing too. And while we were doing this, we put several new features into the old platform. So it's not fair to leave somebody behind on the old stuff. You lose their talent on your new project. And everybody wants to work on the new hotness, right? Nobody wants to work on the old and busted. Everybody wants to come forward and work on the new stuff. And that's a management challenge there to make sure that everybody is getting enough face time with the new stuff and the old thing isn't falling on the floor. Because we have this audience, we don't want to lose them, they're very transient and they can leave at any time. It applies in development, it applies in QA, and it applies in operations. You don't want to leave anybody back on the old stuff and have them lose out on the knowledge that's being built on the new platform. So you want to be able to create this broad base of knowledge across the entire team going into the new platform. That was a big challenge for the dev side, more so than us, as there was only 2 of us to do this whole migration at the beginning, so we were pretty good at sharing things. But the dev team, it was a big challenge for them. So going forward, obviously, AOL's moving towards the web. Look out, web, right? And we now have a new CEO. We have a new direction. Things are finally moving along at AOL. So it's kind of an interesting time to be there. I'm really a newbie at AOL. I've only been there 5 years. So most of the people have been there much, much longer than I have and don't know what that scary internet thing is. And so there's a lot of change going on, a lot of really interesting things that we're doing there. We're working more on our international components. We've kind of failed at that in the past, and we're sort of reevaluating our position there and bringing this nice content. The whole world needs to know about Britney Spears. It's just we have to provide them with that information. We're constantly refreshing the page design, working on bringing in new content, new partnerships with other content providers, with Web 2.0 providers, new things to sort of bring more engagement, bring a more youthful feel to our audience, give people a place to start on the internet. We're also reevaluating our business focus. We have this cash cow hanging out in the back office, this ISP business it's basically a printer that prints money right now. So we have some time to play with that source of revenue while we continue to build this and strengthen this entire platform. And that's important. So we have a little bit of leeway, but we're still focused on revenue and bringing up unique visitors for this platform, for AOL.com and all the other channels that we run on it. We're working on closer integration with more of AOL's products. Nothing that anybody in here would ever look at except maybe the unofficial Apple weblog thing that pops up sometimes. Engadget runs on one of our platforms. So working towards bringing those awesome products into the AOL fold and having them appear on the main page and be promoted there helps drive engagement across our network. So in conclusion, there's good and bad parts about doing this. It was a really unique experience. I was very glad to have done it, although the subtitle for this presentation could have been how to get run over by a Mack truck in 14 months, how to lose 2 weeks of your life to oversubscribe network bandwidth, all kinds of weird things that happened along the way. But it was really cool to do this, to turn down, finally, this old, crufty thing. When everybody says you never turn anything off, you leave stuff running forever, but we got to turn off 300 hosts that were running the old site and just get rid of them. 5 years old, off they go. No longer in our data center, no longer pulling all that power, and bring up this new platform. Retraining is key to learn the ins and outs of the new technology, the config languages, and how best to manage your site that way. But you also want to remember that why you did something on the old product, like our caching. We did caching for a reason. It was very important to us. And we had a real battle there for putting that into the new environment. There's also a huge cultural shift going on at AOL, so hopefully we'll have more participation in the wider environment with our peers going forward, so that we can learn more from you guys, and hopefully some of the stuff that we've learned over the years can be disseminated out finally, as we've kind of been sitting over in Dulles, Virginia by ourselves for a long time, and not putting any information in and out. So that was what I had. I have 3 minutes if anybody has any questions. Otherwise, you can find me anywhere. Google me. I'm not a photographer, so anything that's Mandi Walls on Google that's not a photographer is probably me. So, okay. Okay, thanks, Andrew. So the question is, the hacks and stuff that we had put in on the old platform with the proprietary slimmed down protocols, moving that into a fat protocol like transferring things over HTTP with XML, and whether that would scale. And we've already had some questions there. Part of that was helped by this caching. Some of it was helped by the simple idea of just freaking gzipping it, which another whole story. We are working on, some of our dev team is working on scaling back how wordy the XML is and all those sorts of things. And I don't know that we'll ever get back to weird packets and strange protocols like snack over flap that we used to use, but there is work being done to make sure that we're not going off in the wrong direction with that. Go ahead. Yeah, the AOL servers said, yeah. It's one HTTP get for every hit. Yeah. So the business manages everything in page views or page renders, that sort of thing. That means nothing to me. We base everything off of raw hits there. Yeah. I'm sorry? What are we gaining on? Gating on? Oh, what's our limiting factor there? Over the course of the migration, we ran into network capacity problems that ended up being a buffer overflow on some of our switches. So we widened our network there. Right now, we're gating on business comfort, right? So we can drive more. Basically, what we ended up doing, we had enough capital resources to make the farm very, very wide, wider than it needed to be. And right now, what we're waiting for to sort of bring it all back into a normal range is for the business to say, okay, we're comfortable with you pulling some servers out. So right now, we don't have a true gate as far as the CPU or memory or anything like that. We're more waiting on our business department to be comfortable with us actively managing the capacity of the farm rather than just throwing money at it. And we're very lucky in that AOL.com's operating expenses are made up for the entire year, they're made up in under a month. So we have more leeway to play with that sort of thing. So we're not, a lean, mean startup machine sort of thing with how we spend our capital. That way we can go ahead and just widen things at will. Nobody thunders to AOL. It's horrible to say that, and there have been things in the past that have driven traffic to us, and I call it the Anna Nicole Smith factor. That was the last time we had a really large thundering herd come in. Was the day that it was announced that she had passed away, and for this particular product. Right now, we're fine for something like that. Our big problem then comes with our peers in other departments, our channels providers, the news and sports and weather and traffic and autos and all those folks, making sure that they're scaled when we push traffic to them. Because we're 55 million hits a day, if we're pushing 6% to them and they're falling over, then we have other things that are more systemic across the entire environment that we need to help them work with. And that's really where we are right now. We're so wide at the moment that it'll be fine unless somebody really, really famous dies. Okay, I'm over time, so if you want to catch me, I'll be here the rest of the conference, and thanks a lot.